In this video, we're going to be listening to all of the different low-pass filters inside of Bitwig Studio. I strongly encourage you to set this up yourself on your own setup with your own speakers and monitors so that you can actually hear some of the finer details. There's always that little bit of audio compression that gets brought into these videos, so sometimes it can be hard to hear the subtle differences. I don't think you're going to have a problem hearing it in this video, but you'll want to actually do this yourself so you can really hear it and you can experiment and go further. So we're going to just talk about these different filters, the different sounds, why you might pull the one versus the other, all that good stuff as we go through. So let's just talk about the setup and how I've tried to make this as kind of pure of a one-to-one comparison as possible. We have this synth patch playing. And you can see the various ways I've set that up. Now, instead of using the internal filter envelope generator, we've just brought in an ADSR into the modulator slot, and then you can see that it's sending the same amount to all of the different cutoff frequencies. And then when possible, we've actually just set these up exactly the same way, where we're going to be using the 4-pole at 500 with 40% resonance, except with the EQ5 and the EQ Plus, where we don't actually set a percentage for resonance, we set like a value. And that's totally fine, because what we're going to talk about with these is how much more kind of flexible and unique you can get with the resonance, or even with the degree of steepness in the slope. All that being said, what we're going to do now is we're going to listen to these, and what I'm going to do is, instead of there being a delay between the videos, I'm just going to cut it together so that we can hear them all, and then we're just going to talk about it a little bit. So this is the internal one built in. This is the ladder. This is the filter. This is the EQ5, where we've set the resonance or the Q factor to be 1.5. And finally, this is the EQ Plus, where we've also set the Q factor to be 1.5. So hopefully from this example, you can really hear the differences between these different filters. It's possible that there's two in here that are identical. I really don't know. But as you're going through each of them, you can definitely hear the differences. And specifically with like the low end, like how much of that gets pushed through, how much of that is like really present and strong. And then of course with the resonance factor, as that envelope is moving through, kind of just like how squelchy it is. And sometimes it has more of like a creamy feel to it, and other times it feels like a lot more digitally. So let's just go ahead and just like maybe hit a few notes. So you can hear with the ladder just how much more of like the low end feels like it's gone as compared to the built-in. And then you might be thinking, oh, well, maybe this has something to do with the poly mode being set up, but let's listen to it again. And you can tell that that's not really what's having that impact or that factor. When we listen to the filter, really listen to the resonance differences now. And now listen to the high end coming through on the filter. And I actually like the way that this filter does sound. And then probably my second favorite is the way that this EQ Plus sounds. Now, again, this is all a matter of personal preference and what you're going for. There would be so many scenarios where just using what's built into the polysynth is what makes the most sense, because it's giving you that very rich analog tone, that really kind of true warmth that you might be looking for. But then other times, if you want a little bit of that high end, that little bit more just clean sound coming through, you might go with something like the filter or like the EQ Plus. So again, let's go back to the original. And then let's go to the EQ Plus. And what I really like about the EQ Plus, and something that I've never even experimented with until right now, is the fact that the EQ Plus lets you go to different slopes that you don't have with any of the other filters. So you can actually take this and go all the way up to 48 dB and get that kind of sound versus... There's just something that to me just sounds like cleaner and more pleasing about this EQ Plus. And we can play with the resonance as well and then set something that you would never be able to set from just inside the instrument. And let's go ahead and turn the poly back on and just do one more AB with that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to replace these guys and bring in those different filter designs from the grid. Here we have our models from the grid, the ladder, the SK, the SVF. And if you notice, like with the ladder, for example, we get additional options that we don't have with the ladder that's built into the polysynth. So it will sound, and it does sound different. And the other big thing about it is it takes out like a ton of gain. So I had to bring back in like 6 dB of gain to try to match it, to put it towards the same ballpark. But just a reminder, here's our sound. And then with the polysynth low pass enabled. And now with the grid LD. Now we'll change the non-linearity mode on the LD. And to be honest, I actually have a kind of a tough time hearing the difference between these. It might have something to do with the cutoff point being too low, but this is it with asymmetric. What I really hear is just more clarity in the low end, like that feels a little bit fuller. But that's really the only difference I can hear. And I'm not even sure if that's just my brain playing tricks with me. But, you know, I'm sure some people can hear it much differently. So now let's move on to the low pass SK. And again, we will experiment listening with those nonlinearities. On this one, I definitely can hear that with the asymmetric, it sounds a lot fuller and cleaner in the low end. But yeah, let's just go ahead and listen to this first. And on asymmetric mode. So with this one, I can definitely hear a difference with kind of overall clarity and just sort of fullness. Okay, and then finally, we'll listen to the SVF. This one does not have any control for the slope. So obviously this one's going to sound quite a bit different. And one last time, we'll just listen to the original. So what's the real takeaway from this video? The real takeaway is just that all these filters kind of sound different and they have different options and different modes. And it's up to you as a music producer or as a Bitwig user to figure out exactly what you like or don't like, or just have a memory bank of what am I going to pull to in this situation. With instruments, a lot of times what's built in is going to be absolutely fine. This is purely to just demonstrate all of these different sounds and qualities of the filter. But in a production setting, especially when you're doing automation and you're creating builds and drops, one of the things that's tended to give me the most problems in music production over the years is determining what filter to actually use to do that, to create those builds or those drops, or to do white noise sweeps where you're just drawing in or you're playing in the automation. And a lot of times, I was always just told, oh, analog is going to be better. Like, use a plugin, use a low pass filter plugin to do this with Drive, and it's going to sound better. It's going to sound, I don't know, more unique. But a lot of times those gave me problems, or they just didn't work. It was too obvious of a filter sweep, even with the resonance down to 0. And I would have to sit there and experiment with all these different filters, only to usually want to come back to using just the digital filter, the one in Bitwig that's just called filter. Or after doing this particular experiment, I think I've learned that using the EQ Plus and that filter might be the way to go, because I really like the quality and the smoothness of that particular one. So you have to experiment. You have to just, kind of build up again that sound bank in your own head of what you like and what you dislike. Most of the time, what's built into the instrument is going to be absolutely fine, and that's the way you're going to go. But you could even hear from doing this, like this particular filter sound. Let's just turn off these other ones. That sort of muddy quality to this one that really kind of, I don't want to say lo-fi, but just like very analog, very much an aggressive roll off of those higher frequencies. That just may not work. That just may not be the right thing to do, but you like the sound otherwise. And so it's good to know that, hey, I can go and I can use the EQ Plus and use that filter instead. And that's going to give me a more hi-fi digital kind of quality. And for certain parts, that might be the way you have to go. So that's going to do it for this video. I think in maybe one of the next videos, we'll also go further and bring in some plugins as well, because we can actually look at those in like Plugin Doctor and see the actual differences and what's going on. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you've learned something new, and it's something you can sit down and experiment with. Thanks for watching. Bye.